I'm Janet Cox. I lead Climate Action California, and this is a big deal for us. Climate Action California is a volunteer-run organization that focuses on three things. Short-lived climate pollutants, and methane is at the top of our list. Transportation electrification, which we talked about last week, and measures that speed the transition to a low carbon economy that we all need to get to, and that's a constant conversation. Today we're here because the California Air Resources Board is holding a public workshop on Thursday where they're going to talk about, well, we think they're going to talk about their reluctance to move to regulate methane from agriculture. They contend that they can meet their statutory goals with incentives and sort of herd sizes getting smaller in California. We disagree. We think it is essential that they move to regulate methane from agriculture, and you're going to hear about why. Today, you're going to hear from two of our volunteers, Dan Chandler and Will Brieger, who have done an amazing amount of work putting a petition, a formal petition together to CARB, which CARB is taking very seriously, and it is kind of likely that one motivation for this workshop they're having on Thursday is our petition, which they happen to have mostly denied, and you'll hear about that too. And Linda Hutchins Knowles, our volunteer coordinator, is going to make it very clear how everyone can actually comment. What we're hoping people will do after listening to this galvanizing presentation is to make comment remotely or in writing after the workshop on Thursday, letting CARB know that the public really cares about this. And for good reasons, CARB needs to regulate. So I just a couple of housekeeping details before we get started. Please leave your self on mute unless you're called on to speak. We'll take questions at the end of the sections of the presentation you're about to hear. And we will be sharing the presentation, the video with everyone after the fact. And we have a document we'll be putting in the chat that will give you details on how you might comment when we get there. So with that, oh, and I also want to thank Leah Eilbeck, who our intern, who is kind of making the trains run on time here, which is wonderful. So with that, I want to introduce Dan Chandler from 350 Humboldt, but he's kind of a major contributor to Climate Action California, and Will Brieger, who's also connected with 350 Sacramento. We do have a coalition of groups we work with, and it's pretty great. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to Dan. Here's the agenda. This is generally what we're going to cover. And sorry, this is a little excessively homey, but we'll get there. Why don't you just move on through the slides, Dan? I think we'll be good.
Okay, so we're going to start with a petition that CAC put into CARB last March. We've been working on it for months. And this is an official petition. They are required to respond to it. The response comes from the staff, not from the board. They did respond. We gave them some extra time, and they responded on May 30th, and they denied the petition. So we're still working on it and working on getting the board to take a separate action from the staff. So I wanted to go through quickly what some of the points that we made in the petition, because we're still making them. They're still valid, even though the staff turned down the petition. We're still trying to get CARB board members on board with all of this. So I think most people know the problem of methane. It's short term, which is not a problem. That's actually a good thing. It accounts for about 30% of the warming. But because if you stop emitting it within 12 to 20 years, it dissipates, the warming also dissipates. So this is our biggest chance to cut warming while we're still cutting CO2. This is just real quickly, the dairies and livestock in California are very different from the problem of livestock overall. Livestock in the world is a big problem, but it's mostly enteric methane. That's the burps that come out of the cows, and that's the blue in this graph. On my screen, this is too big, so
Perfect to me.
I think
it's fine.
Yeah, it's good.
Fine. So on the right-hand slide, you can see that the black line, which is the manure methane, is up to about 55%. It's very different from the rest of the world and even the United States. So why do we have so much manure methane? The answer is basically, let's see, here it is, because of how manure is managed here. We have these very large CAFOs, these very large confined animal dairies, up to 13,000. And they use the anaerobic lagoon, which, as you can see, is the most methane producing of all the methods of regulating manure. So basically, it's this dependence on flushing the manure out of the barns and out of the feeding stalls and into these giant lagoons, bigger than a football field. Since oxygen doesn't get to them, it creates methane and it just goes up off the lagoon. Other methods, pasture is obviously a whole lot better, but that's not what is used except like up here in Humboldt County on the North Coast. So what California has done is we've tried to capture the methane that comes off of these lagoons. This is a picture of a lagoon with a digester. The digester is the capture method, and then the gas called biogas gets upgraded and sold to biomethane distributors. A lot of them are in the low carbon fuel standard. So there are other methods of dealing with methane. Probably the most common one is solid liquid separation. So if you separate the poop out from the water that you flushed, as it is here on the left, you sort of get back to the situation like with a pasture, where the manure can oxidize and it doesn't create methane. Or you can fill a pit with rocks and worms, and the worms will eat the organic materials. And so it's about as effective as a digester. So there are ways of doing this. Regulation is supposed to happen. SB 1383 was passed in 2016 and requires a reduction of dairy and livestock emissions by 2030 of 40%. So we're not on track for that. In Thursday's workshop, CARB is going to say that we are on track to cut 6.6 million metric tons rather than the 9 million metric tons 40% represents. And we don't really agree with this. This has changed from when they denied the petition. They said it was only 4.6 million tons that have been abated, but now it's 6.6. So that's a pretty big jump, and we don't want to let them get away with it. And there are reasons to feel that they should not get away with it. So what's been happening for the last 8 years is that CARB and the California Department of Agriculture have been giving money to dairies to capture their manure methane in one of these ways above. However, SB 1383 says that starting in 2024, CARB can regulate. And in fact, they're supposed to adopt regulations before then. If they go ahead and implement them, they have to, there are some other steps they have to take. So, sorry. Let's see, the 40% was taken off of from the baseline of 2013, and everything else in California's climate goals is done on 1990. And if we use 1990 as the baseline, far more methane would have to be reduced than with this peak 40%. So we have used incentives, but incentives have not gotten us far enough. So regulations could be adopted quickly, and we can also now regulate enteric methane, even though we have to prove that consumers will accept it and that it is safe and so on. But the FDA has approved a mechanism for doing that. Despite all of these reasons for regulating, no regulations have ever been workshopped or adopted. So this is the situation with methane in California. We hear about landfill methane, and most of us think about oil and gas methane, but livestock makes up a much greater portion of it. Just to explain the metric here, global warming potential is usually done for CO2. That is how much warming can happen, will happen if you emit a metric ton of a gas. And then we convert that into other gases. And in this case, we're using methane, but methane, since it dissipates in 12 years thereabouts, 12 to 20, people convert it and use this standard of CO2 equivalent across 20 years. So CARB does, when it does its emission inventory for methane, it does both a 20-year and a 100-year CO2 equivalent. So this is the reason. This red bar is why we want to regulate methane. Everything else is regulated. Why isn't livestock? Okay, it's also a social issue. All of these CAFOs are in the Central Valley, mostly in the San Joaquin Valley, which is a non-attainment area. Methane is co-produced with ammonia. Ammonia is the precursor for PM 2.5. Also, methane degrades and becomes ozone, the kind that we don't like. And of course, hydrogen sulfide is a terrible smell that people who live near dairies are subjected to. So regulation of methane is really the way that we're going to get these other very noxious conditions that are affecting not only the climate, but water and air pollution in the valley. It's the only way we're going to get those handled. So at the workshop on Thursday, they're going to tell us what they've been doing to try and measure methane. Unfortunately, what we hoped they were doing was figuring out a way to regulate by determining how much each farm produced in the way of methane, and then determining how much they would have to abate that. But instead, they have used their new method to try and show that, in fact, there's less methane being emitted than there was before. In other words, that because of a reduction in herd size, 22% of that 40% that they have to meet is already been met. So this is a slide that you will see on Thursday if you attend the workshop. This is from CARB. Their slides are out already. And you can see this lower line with the dotted lines. It starts in 2022. In 2022, the solid part goes to 2022. That's how much we had abated, and if you project that out to 2030, we will have abated only half of the 9 million metric tons that we need to abate. So what they're doing in this workshop is they're showing that you're going to get this additional 2 million metric tons of abatement because there has been a reduction in the herd size. As I say, we're quite skeptical about that, but this is the essence of what this workshop that they're doing is, and they want board members to hear it because they think that they can get the 2.4 million metric tons that's still left over. They think they can get that done, and the board won't require them to regulate as they might very well if they're stuck at this much lower level where they would only create a 20% reduction by 2030. So let's see, somebody's waiting to get into the, thank you. So what are we trying to do on Thursday? We want many commenters to cite the arguments of the petition for the benefit of the board members, because CARB is trying to get a quorum of board members to this workshop. That's how important they think it is. And we're going to be critiquing the data that they are presenting, which is called CAD, C-A-D-D. Draw your own conclusions. But our goal is to make these comments and influence the board members so that they might move towards regulation. And I think that is the end of this presentation. And I'd like to turn it over to Will, who has been taking the lead. We've been meeting with board members, and he has been the lead on all of that. So Will Brigger.
Hello. So Dan has presented the substantive basis for why we filed that petition, which the bottom line was we asked for a regulation and that was declined. Along the way, the response agrees with almost all our points. Methane's vitally important. The dairy and livestock industry is a huge source. Something's got to happen. Where we differed was the CARB staff that prepared the response concluded that they want to keep on with the incentive programs that have made modest reductions so far. So a quick aside about how CARB works so that people know kind of the context of the workshop and why it's important to comment. Typically, the staff and the chair, who is full-time at CARB, kind of drive the agenda. The board members have expertise, but they're only very part-time, and they kind of go along with what's presented, ask questions, and can vote yes or no. We're trying to change that dynamic a little bit here because the staff has obviously shown it's not inclined to do a regulation. And I assume the chair was supportive of that. It's a significant decision. So I'm sure Chair Randolph was, fully involved. The board members, though, are quite interested, and we've met with them almost, well, certainly a majority of them, and they're all very interested in doing something and wondering why we can't regulate. So one of the things that we want to happen at the workshop is for the board to hear that the public is watching. We want something to happen for all the reasons in the petition. So the thing to understand about a workshop, they're not going to make decisions, but they serve at least three purposes. One is it's a chance for the board to sort of take the pulse of the public. So they're listening. The board members will be either watching personally or will hear about it. And so comments make a big difference. The second thing at a workshop is they're gathering information, or they're putting out a set of data or proposal as a trial balloon, and they want to hear the public's critique, sometimes from academic experts, people in the industry, members of the public like us. And the third thing is it updates the public. They can tell the public, this is what has happened. And I'm sure there's going to be quite a bit of that, so that the public can feel good that CARB is studying this and is, on top of the issue, despite, CAC's view that they haven't done anything that they could and should. So that's why we're asking for comments. Two of the issues that will come up that deserve comment are the fact that we might get there with just incentives. Well, that's kind of outrageous. Every other sector in industry has been regulated under our kind of comprehensive climate program. And that means consumers are paying more, a little bit, for electricity, for gasoline, for food, any product made in California. There's just a little extra surcharge, worthwhile, because we're tackling greenhouse gas emissions. But the dairy and livestock industry gets a total pass. There's no reason for that, no logical reason. The other thing that's going to come up is we're not sure, we CARB, exactly what the herd size is, and we're not sure what the emissions are, et cetera. Well, there is no reason for CARB to be unsure. They have the power to send a letter for 73 cents, just like the rest of us, that is formally a subpoena that requires every livestock facility to respond within a stated time and tell them, we've got this many cattle, we have this type of facility, we think our emissions would be X. That's what CARB does to every other industry. They gather that information, no reason they couldn't do it here, and take away all these mysteries so that it doesn't serve as an excuse. We don't know enough to regulate. We're not sure about this or that. There's no reason for CARB not to be totally sure. So those are all legitimate comments. And I think you're going to hear a presentation a little bit further about other specific ideas for commenting that might feel more comfortable for you.
So if you have questions, if you think everybody would be interested, why don't we answer them now? If you have questions that you think probably mostly you would be interested, we can take them at the end. So if you have, I can't see who's got a hand up, but if you have a hand up, why don't you just talk?
So Jean Mendoza, you have a question about types of digesters? Would you like to ask that question? Unmute yourself. Well, Jean Jean's question in the chat is, do you know what percentage of anaerobic digesters in California are hub and spoke digesters?
We don't know that. Hub and spoke refers to, you have a bunch of different dairies and they're all feeding one biomethane plant, production plant. At least I think that's what Jean is talking about. Jean's a very, very active anti-methane and anti-CAFO activist in Washington. We don't know the percentage, but it's fairly high because since 2017 or so, almost all of the digesters have been used not to produce electricity, which they could be used, and we need a lot of electricity, but to produce biomethane, which is no different from regular methane. You burn it, it produces greenhouse gas emissions. So that there are only two main biomethane producers in the state, and they have tried to set up these hub and central production facility as much as they can. So if you're closer to this, you will participate. But I don't know the percentage of those. I'm sure that it's at least the 58 that are part of LCFS, but there are something like 140 digesters, and beyond that, I'm not sure. Any other questions?
Jean Mendoza, you have a question? Oh.
I just wanted to follow up why I asked that question. We have a proposed hub and spoke digester up here in Washington. And one of the big concerns we have about it is the large amount of NOx that is going to be produced by the diesel trucks that will haul the manure back and forth from the farms to the digester. So that's why I asked that question. To us, the hub and spoke model.
Yeah, that's right. We talked with some advocates from Leadership Council a couple of days ago, and they made the same point that when you get the hub and spoke, you're getting a large number of digesters in one area, and you're getting all these diesel engines. And there's no requirement in California that you use a low emission machinery, and so absolutely, you're right. That's and you might want to get in touch with the Leadership Council because they are right in your corner on this.
Thank you. Ann Harvey has a question.
Hi, yeah, I have a couple. So I'm assuming from the graph that you had of the proportion of methane emission from cows that it's so much higher from manure in California, is that they produce the same amount of methane from burping, but just much, much more from manure, so more altogether per cow. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I wish I'd been able to figure out a graph that made that clear, but I'm glad you got it. Okay,
thanks. So I guess this just came up for me with the hub and spoke question. That would that mean that smaller dairies or livestock facilities that might have a less, a less detrimental way of dealing with their manure because they're smaller and maybe it's spread out and not in these huge pools, and they use this hub and spoke, that might just make a lot more pollution of every kind altogether?
It is possible. Up here in Humboldt County, somebody from the East Coast, I think from Connecticut or Massachusetts, one of these hub and spoke biomethane producers, talked to 7 dairies who are basically, most of it, they're using pastures, but they talk them into collecting all the manure and trucking it to a central place. Fortunately, it was not funded by CDFA, so it's not existing, but that is a problem. That's this hub and spoke is it is more likely to add to the farms that are using digesters rather than alternative manure methods. Yeah.
Thanks. And the incentives you're talking about, that's the low carbon fuel standard incentives, or how does this interact with the low carbon fuel standard subsidizing dairies for?
Well, the most of the incentives come from the California Department of Agriculture, a little bit from cap and trade. CDFA has funded, I think, about 355 dairies for either digesters, about 140 of them. And then there are also these alternative manure management things like the separation of liquids and solids and vermifiltration or acidification, just biochar. There's a variety of methods. Those are the incentives. The link to the low carbon fuel standard is that CARB counts these emissions. It's really bizarre because CDFA gives somebody several $1 million to capture their methane, and then CARB claims that methane would have been released otherwise. And if it would have been released otherwise, they call it avoided emissions, and they give it a huge carbon minus carbon intensity score. So dairy manure has become extremely valuable because you can have a fleet of trucks that are emitting diesel, and if you buy credits from the dairy people, you can run a lot more of your trucks than if you have to buy credits from a solar farm, say.
So they're getting double incentivized.
Yeah,
Real thing.
triple.
And I'm sorry, I know other people have questions. Can I just ask quickly also though, is there even more inhumane treatment of the cows in order to like keep them like that picture you had? They're just all lined up and can't move so that their poop goes down into a conveyor belt.
Well, that's the CAFO part of it, right? That's the confined animal part of it. That's just the way it's organized, and whether they have a digester or not is irrelevant to that organization.
Thanks.
Any other questions before we move on? Jean Mendoza.
Jean,
Thanks.
go ahead.
Yeah. When I talk to people about the bad aspects of the digesters, I frequently say that solid liquid separation is almost as effective and costs much less. And when I'm making that argument, I kind of make it as an either or. I hope I'm correct on that, and I'm asking for your opinion. Is it possible to have a digester and use solid liquid separation?
Yes, there have been studies where they have measured, one in particular I'm thinking of, where the abatement of methane from solid liquid separation was equivalent to that from a digester. But if you use the two together, you didn't get any added bonus. So either one, but putting them both together, and there are some dairies that do use both, but it doesn't seem like you get a lot more in the way of abatement by doing that.
So I'm unclear about the sequencing. If you're using both, are you separating the solids and liquids, and then what goes to the digester? Or does the solid liquid separation happen after the digestion process?
No, it's before, and the water from the solid liquid separation goes to the lagoon and the digester.
So they just digest the water from the lagoon?
Yeah, that it has it has a lot less, um, what are they called? The organics, the volatile organic solids in it than if you don't do the separation. And I expect that's why you don't get a bonus if you do both the digester and the solid liquid separation.
Thank you, Dan. That helps me a lot.
Okay, I'll send you the paper then, basing that on. Okay, are we ready to go on?
Looks like we are.
Yes, I think we should.
Okay, so we have prepared a bunch of different possible comments for you, depending on what you're willing and able to do. And this is sort of the most basic one. So I'll give you a second to read it. I don't need to read it for you, obviously.
And I think, Dan, I could give an overview about this.
Okay.
That sound
Yeah,
good?
please do, Linda.
So we realize that people on this call have different levels of expertise on the topic. Some from their questions, we can see you already know a lot and can give very detailed comments, and others may be more new to it. So this Me Too comment is for those that just want something very simple, that you don't have to feel like you have to really do any homework besides coming to this workshop. And where there's a little asterisk, it is important to include a personal reason why it matters to you. It could just be like at the bottom that if you live near a dairy, that would be good to mention. You don't have to. This pollution is affecting the air quality and the climate crisis. So this is level 1. And then on the next slide, we have a Google Doc we're going to share in a minute that has longer comments divided into like more substantial and more technical. And on this slide, we're just showing you the kind of options we have for those comments. We've numbered them to make it easy. We thought after we go over the overview, we want to show them to you and see if you guys want to sign up for certain comments so we don't have duplicates and we cover as many as possible. And so there's one more, the next one. We can go to the next one. I'm not going to go through them yet. We're going to go to the Google Doc, but so the next slide is the more technical comments. And then one more slide to show now, and if you may have to refresh your screen on this one, but I did include a link to how do you register for the workshop. You should register for the CARB workshop so you get the Zoom link. And if you'd like to get a text the day of, let's say you can't attend the presentation at the beginning, I think it'll be wonderfully informative and interesting if you can. There'll be a panel as well as staff presentation, but if you can't, that's totally fine. You could sign up to get a group text, and Leah, our intern, is going to be monitoring the hearing or the workshop and can text you when it's time to raise your hand. So now I think it might be good to go through the Google Doc, and maybe we could, Dan, are you able to switch to showing that, or would you like one of us to show the Google Doc?
Well, we can show the Google Doc, but people are certainly not going to have time to read those things. That's what I thought the summaries were for.
So we could go back. Yeah, we could just do it from this level, and to let you know, there's very much a lot of detail. So yeah.
Yeah, so these first 6 or so are just a short paragraph. It would take a minute or less. And there are things that many people could say if they wanted to. That is, some of the later ones, it would feel pretty contrived if more than one person was saying one of those things. But these are things that that people could say, and lots of people could say them. The first one is just that we're really interested in what the board has to think about, has to say about all this, and asking the board to agendize regulation of livestock methane for September. The second one is just talking about the importance of methane reduction by 2030. The third is the air pollution reduction in the San Joaquin Valley, which there will be a bunch of people at the hearing from the San Joaquin Valley who will be talking about the air pollution that they associate with the digesters. And then this thing is billed as a stakeholders meeting, and all of us are stakeholders with respect to methane. It's sort of bizarre that they are taking the dairies and the people who live near the dairies as the main stakeholders, when the real issue for they're stakeholders in pollution, but for methane, everybody on Earth is a stakeholder. And then another one is California really needs to lead other countries in livestock methane reduction. Now, again, these are all things that there's a paragraph on. And the final one here is California missing the goal, okay? And then these are more technical ones. This one's on how regulating methane would lead to reducing pollution. Second one, another one is that in fact digesters may increase ammonia and nitrous oxide in the digestate, so that it's a solution with some very unintended consequences. And then the third one is this next one, number 9, is talking about that there are many methods of reducing methane for livestock that all of the dairies should participate in, not just the 355 who've been paid off to do so. And the option 10 talks about the CDFA having put millions of dollars into these alternative methods. And option 11 is the more detail about the statutory requirement. Let's see. Option 12, there are some SB 1383 preconditions for regulation. And this argues that they have been met already. And this one, option 13, cites a study that shows that methane may be as much as 60% higher than CARB estimates, because CARB does not actually do any measurement at this point. So the next one is that leaving out the most recent workshop estimates, that CARB's previous estimates on how much methane has been reduced don't really pass a face validity test. Regulation of dairy methane will also will also solve the avoided emissions problem in the low carbon fuel standard. And this is the big one, I think, and Will refer to it. We have to reduce as much methane as soon as we can. And it all has to be done by 2030. That's what the UN says. And we can do much more than the methane, than the 40% that was in the legislation. We shouldn't be limited to that. So those are the comments. And any of those you're interested in, there is a much longer statement of what they are in this other document. If you want to show that document. Now, Linda, I'm not sure if you do or not, but.
Actually, I don't think it's needed, but what do you think, Janet? Do we show them that long one or just share the?
Just to give people a sense of what we're,
Yeah.
We're just trying to prepare everybody to make the best possible comments. So, and I think the document is it's a great resource for doing that. So.
Yeah, and Leah put a link to it in the chat at 12:43. So anybody here can also
maybe just open that link and see what you think. We don't have to share it, but yeah, I mean, we're just trying to give everybody all the resources we can think of to make this easy, because it's so important.
And I'm just wondering, thinking the logistics through about if people here want to see, if you have a particular one you'd like to comment on, we could tag it with your name so that we know, Jean is going to cover point 13, just making it up. Who knows? Teresa would cover point 10, but we don't want to assign it. We want you to feel comfortable. So do we want to take some time to do it, or do we want to give people the power to make suggestions on the doc and like put their name, but that could get messy. What do we think?
Suggestion on the doc is, so you have a comment form, right, Linda?
You know what we could do for the one that where you sign up to text, I can quickly edit that Google Doc where it says, which would you like to give one of our pre-prepared points? And if so, which one?
Form, yeah.
Yeah. But the other people won't know. So it also, I don't know how we get that information to other people. So I see Elise has her hand up. Maybe if you have an idea about the process, Elise, we could take that suggestion.
Oh, well, I was going to ask, number one, is there a time limit? Number two, is there going to be a very long meeting ahead of the comments? And then number three, I think the suggestion idea on the document might be okay.
Mm-hmm. If people just make a comment, like you can highlight it and put your name in a comment, if folks know how to do that. And to answer the questions, I believe that the time limit is 3 minutes. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually it's 3 minutes per speaker at these meetings.
Usually, if there's a lot of people sign up, they sometimes cut to 2, but this meeting goes from I think 10 to 5, so they should have time. And as to the question of, is there a lot of stuff before the comments? Their slide presentation is 59 slides long, so that's a pretty long presentation. And then there's going to be a panel by the Leadership Council. So I would say at least through lunch. After lunch is probably going to be when the comments are.
So if that's the case, is there an option of asking to be texted when we can call in to make a comment?
Yes. If we wanted to go back to the slide deck, there's a Google form.
Okay.
And yes. So we wanted to make this easy for you. So Leah's going to monitor it and text folks who requested to get a text to say, you know, we're coming back to lunch at say 1 o'clock. That'll be the time to raise hands, or, you know, whatever updates we have during the meeting, we'll let people know with the timing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Linda, can I just scroll through this a little bit so people can see what the options look like for you know, I summarized them, but so these first ones are just one paragraph, so you know, that's a minute speaking, something like that, these first ones. And the more technical ones are probably somewhere between 1 minute and 3 minutes. And that one looks like may go over 3 minutes. Anyhow, I summarized before what they were, and this is what they look like. And this document is available for you to use, and we just have to figure out the way that you're going to let us know which one you're going to choose.
I would say you could assign me one since they're written out. Makes it easy, and then or I don't know, you can't write on the document now because it says request editing privileges or something, so we can't claim it on the document.
If we changed it to people can suggest, link can suggest, then people could highlight the option and put a comment and put your name in the comment. So I could demonstrate that if we think that would work.
Yeah, why don't you change the permissions?
That's a good idea.
I don't think I can, but I think Dan can as the owner of the document. You know how you said anybody with the link could view? You could do anybody with the link can comment. And I'm going to show it for an example of that. So like, I'm going to be probably doing a Me Too. Maybe I'll pick someone later, but for now I'll put down like, I'm tagging myself. So if anyone's looking at the document, you'll see that like a Me Too is assigned to me. And I'm going to say, you know, as many people as would like can do the Me Too's. It's not like no one else can do it.
So I just made the document so that anybody can edit it. So you can write your name by any of these things.
And I recommend like you highlight the one you want and put a comment to the side, and then we'll see your name there. So, yeah, and I thought point 13 was especially important. That was the one that this livestock methane problem could be worse than we even know, and that regulations needed, so we actually will measure it. And I wondered if anyone here was passionate about that, to make sure that comment is made.
Sure.
Who is that?
This is Will. I'll do that.
Okay, great. Do you want me to tag you for that, Will, or do you want to tag
Yeah,
yourself?
if type my name in there on capital
And I can
letters.
tag other people who would like, if you know what other one you'd like to do, if anyone else here knows. Although I see we're coming up at the top of the hour too, so we may need to just let folks sign up on their own for after this. I'm actually having trouble, for some reason, I'm trying to double Google Docs marking, so I won't be able to mark you right now, Will.
Okay.
So if you could share your slide deck, Dan, just to go over a few final points.
Yeah, just a second. I have to get back to that page. Things used to be so much simpler. Not that I want to go back. Okay. So is this?
Yeah. So yeah, just making sure that, again, Leah put it in the chat, but it's important that you do register for the workshop. So you'll get the Zoom link and any information they might send out about it. And then this is the form, the tinyurl.com/CARB workshop texts. That is case sensitive, so make sure you put CARB all caps and the rest lowercase. That's how you can sign up to get a text alert. And then the next slide. I included a couple of more links, and we can send this out afterwards to you with the slide deck. But there's a link to more information on the CARB workshop, to our petition that on CARB's website, and to the slide deck that they're going to present. So if you wanted to read it through ahead of time, you could look at that. And then next, I just wanted to say that thank you everybody for coming today. It was wonderful to have this level of interest and great questions. If you're not already involved with Climate Action California, we'd love to encourage you to get involved. Or if you're just kind of dipping your toe in, we encourage you to get more involved. You may know we have 12 volunteer-run teams that advance impactful climate solutions. Today, this has been from the Methane from Agriculture team that Dan is the lead of. So if you'd like to get more involved in that team, we always could use more volunteers, but we have other topics too if they interest you. So there's a link at the bottom where you can sign up to volunteer, and also happy to have a one-on-one with you, or we could chat and do a little video call, and I could talk to you more about what we do at Climate Action California and how you can get involved. So with that, I think we could wrap up the formal thing, but yeah, Janet, do you want to wrap us up?
There are a couple of questions in the chat. Chris asked about priorities. Dan, can you go back to that document and tell us which ones you and Will think are the most important for people to sign up for? And then Anne has signed up for number 15, and I think I can put her name in there. But if you could just, it'd be great to know, Dan, which ones you think are the most important, because we don't have enough people on this call to make all of them.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that. Let's see. I'm having trouble getting back to that.
You can show my screen.
Yeah, why don't you share your screen?
Let me do that. That's assuming I can find the document. Yeah. Okay, so we'll pass by the Me Too's. So these more substantive comments, these are the little bit easier. Do you have a favorite here?
But I think all of the shorter ones are really important through option 6.
Yeah.
So any of those would are really important. Then maybe the air pollution one is not so important because the leadership council is going to be there talking about that. There are a couple that have to do with air pollution, and those are not so critical. And then the other 2 that are maybe not so critical are the ones that have to do with saying that we already know how to do this, because they know that. So that would be about 4 that would be of lower priority.
Okay, so 7. I'm sorry, I missed the other 4 or the other 3.
Not option 9 is one of the ones that would be lower priority, and option 10 would be of lower priority.
Okay. That gives you some.
Yeah, and I see that Elise said she would do number 15, which is great. So,
So Ann Harvey had already said that she wanted to do 15, and I put her name in here.
oh, I didn't see that.
Okay, I can do 16.
Great.
Thanks, Elise.
Thanks, Elise. Any other takers before we sign off?
I think people can sign up all the way right up until roughly noon on Thursday. You
Yep.
don't have to make a choice right now, but we hope we won't put it off too long.
Yeah, put your name on the on your favorite comment, maybe turn it red, and that'll be great. It's just, thank you all for coming. This is really a wonderful project, and I kind of think we can make this happen if we all work on it together. So
Thank
Oh,
you.
one
to
other
Will and
there were a number of people who came into this meeting pretty late and missed a lot of Dan's substantive introduction. So what I'm going to suggest is that as soon as we get the video out of Zoom, that we send the link around to the people who are on this call. How does that sound to people? I'm just, I don't want anybody to miss the content. We'll post it for everybody on our website, but that'll take a couple of days, and the hearing is in, the workshop is in a couple of days. But I do want the people who came late to this meeting to have the chance to
yeah, we
hear.
got a thumbs up.
That makes sense.
Got a thumbs up on that from Alan. Sounds like that would be helpful. So great. Wonderful.
Okay. So stay tuned. And thank you.
Big thanks to Will and Dan for an awesome presentation and background. It was fascinating. And thanks to everybody who came, because we need you. Thanks for speaking up if you can.
It's great.